Hi everyone, and welcome back to another fairy tale. Today we're going to be reading the story of the Ugly Duckling. Now this isn't a princess story, but I think you'll like it just as much. One by one, the little ducklings broke out of their eggs. Their mother watched proudly as they fluffed up their yellow feathers and took their first eager steps into the big wide world. But there was one egg that still hadn't hatched. "Oh dear," said the mother duck. "I wonder why it's taking so long." Just then, the old duck from down the lane waddled by. When she saw the egg, she shook her head and tut-tutted. "It looks like you've got a turkey's egg there," she said. "I'd leave it alone if I were you." The mother duck looked worried. "I think I'll just wait a few more days," she said. She waited and waited. Then, at last, there was a tap, 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 and a beak broke through the shell. Slowly, a strange, straggly creature struggled out of the egg. He was much bigger than the other ducklings and had dull, grubby-looking feathers. "Come along," said the mother duck, nudging him with her beak. "Follow me." The little ducklings all hurried after her in a line, with the newcomer tottering along awkwardly at the back. When they came to the pond, the mother duck jumped into the water. One after the other, the ducklings plopped in behind her until only the big duckling was left. "You can do it," quacked his mother. The duckling looked doubtful, but then he took a deep breath and jumped into the water. A moment later, he bobbed to the surface, his webbed feet paddling furiously. "You can swim," his mother beamed. "A turkey, indeed! What does that silly old duck know?" On the way home, the mother duck took her brood through the farmyard to show them off. As they passed, the hens nudged one another and pointed. "Look at that duckling," they clucked. "Have you ever seen anything so ugly? It looks like a turkey chick." "That hideous creature, a relative of mine. What an absurd idea," spluttered the turkey. "You're not exactly an oil painting yourself, you know," muttered one of the hens, and the others all cackled loudly. This really ruffled the turkey's feathers. Turning red in the face, he puffed himself up and chased after the duckling. "Get out of here," he gobbled furiously. You're not welcome." The poor duckling tried to get away, but in his hurry he tripped and fell flat on his beak. The hens screeched with laughter. "Look how clumsy he is," they jeered. "Anyone can see that he doesn't belong here." Go away, cheeped their chicks, pecking at him spitefully. The ugly duckling ran this way and that, but everywhere he turned there were cruel beaks and mocking faces. In a flurry of feathers, he fled from the farmyard. He ran until darkness fell around him. Then he crept into the bushes and hid his head under his wing. In the morning, the duckling was woken by a strange honking sound. He peeked out of the bushes and found two wild geese staring at him. "What on earth do you think that is?" asked the first goose. "I can't really tell," replied the second. The duckling shrank back, trembling. "Oh, don't worry," said the first goose. "We won't hurt you." "Of course not," clucked the other. "You're a funny little thing, but I rather like you. Why don't you come with us?" Before the duckling could reply, there was a loud bang right by them. The geese flew into a panic. "Help! Help! There are hunters here!" they cried. They took flight and left the duckling sitting all alone. A moment later, a hunting dog splashed through the reeds, growling and baring its teeth. Too terrified to move, the duckling closed his eyes tightly and waited for the dog to snap him up. But the dog took one look at him and then turned and ran back. The duckling opened his eyes and breathed a sigh of relief. "Luckily, I'm so ugly that even the dog won't come near me," he thought. Yet in his heart, he felt sad and lonely. He waited until the gunshots had died down and went on his way. Soon it started to rain. The duckling got soaking wet and looked more bedraggled than ever. Eventually, he came to a ramshackle barn. The door was hanging off its hinges, and the roof looked ready to fall in, but at least it was dry. The duckling crept inside and huddled in a corner. A cat happened to be taking shelter there too, and watched him silently from the rafters. Then it leaped down and prowled around the duckling, staring at him with glinting green eyes. "What sort of creature are you?" it asked suspiciously. "I'm not sure," replied the duckling. "Not sure," repeated the cat. Its ears twitched and its eyes narrowed. "Well, let's see. Can you purr?" it asked. "No," said the duckling. "Can you swish your tail?" said the cat, flicking its tail menacingly. "I'm afraid not," answered the duckling. "Can you arch your back?" asked the cat. The duckling shook his head. "Well, what can you do?" asked the cat. The duckling thought for a moment and then proudly declared, "I can swim." The cat shuddered. "Swim," it hissed in disgust. "Why would anybody want to do a thing like that?" "You wouldn't understand," said the duckling miserably. "I think I'd better be on my way." So he set out into the world again, but wherever he went, it was just the same. Frogs hopped out of his way, squirrels nudged one another as he waddled by, and storks stared down their beaks at him. Eventually, the duckling hid himself away in long reeds around a lake where nobody could see him to make unkind remarks. Then, one evening, just as the sun was setting, there was a rustle among the reeds, and a flock of beautiful birds sailed out onto the lake. Their feathers were dazzling white, and they had long, slender necks. They were swans. Suddenly, they began to run across the water, beating their mighty wings. The duckling watched in awe as they flew up into the sky. "Please don't go," he cried, but the swans were already too far away to hear him. The ugly duckling felt lonelier than ever. The wind swept through the trees, stripping the golden leaves from their branches. A raven swooped down and settled on a bare branch. "Winter's coming," it croaked gloomily. The weather grew colder and colder. Snowflakes drifted down from the sky, and ice crept across the surface of the lake. It became harder and harder to find food. The hungry duckling climbed out of the lake and wandered around the forest looking for something to eat. Evening fell, and long blue shadows stretched across the ground. The snow looked so soft that he lay down and fell asleep. In the morning, a woodcutter found him there, cold and stiff. Gently, the man picked up the creature and carried it home. The woodcutter laid the ugly duckling down by the fire, and his children gathered around it. When the ugly duckling woke up to find their curious faces staring down at him, he was so frightened that he flapped around the kitchen and knocked over a milk jug. The children laughed and ran after him, wanting to play. In a panic, the duckling flapped up out of their way, but this time he landed in a jar of flour. "Look at the mess you've made," scolded the woodcutter's wife. "Get out of here." Leaving a trail of floury footprints behind him, the duckling ran out of the door. His webbed feet padded along faster and faster. He beat his wings, and a moment later he found himself soaring up into the sky. He flew and flew until he felt the gentle warmth of the sun on his wings. In the meadow where he landed, the sun had begun to melt, and the snowdrops were peeking through. Little by little, the land turned green again. Bees buzzed from flower to flower, and the larks sang a welcoming song each morning. It was spring. One day, the ugly duckling was swimming on a lake when he saw 3 swans. He wanted to rush out to greet them, but he hesitated. They were so elegant, and he was so ugly that he hardly dared to approach them. Then he thought, "What have I got to lose?" Plucking up his courage, he swam to meet them. When the swans saw him, they rushed towards him with their wings outstretched. The duckling cowered from them, thinking they were going to beat him, but they didn't. They bowed their heads politely instead and said, "Welcome to the lake, It's always nice to meet one of our kind." "What do you mean?" said the duckling in confusion. "I'm not at all like you. I'm brown and ugly." And one of the swans smiled and said, "Not anymore. Have you seen yourself recently? Take a look in the water." The duckling looked down at his reflection and gasped. His curved neck was long and elegant, and all his feathers were dazzling white. He wasn't an ugly duckling anymore. "I'm a swan," he cried. "I'm a beautiful swan." From that moment on, he was the happiest swan that ever lived. The end. I hope you enjoyed that story today, and please join us next time for the next fairy tale we can read together. Thanks. Bye.